I've always wanted to speak here because when I grew up, the primary influence, spiritual influence, was from Swami Ranganathan of the RamaKrishna mission. He was the head in Delhi. And so my parents knew him very well. He used to visit our house when I was a teenager. Since then, and we used to attend his lectures. So, and also Swami Vivekananda's complete works I looked at and referred to all my life. And therefore I'm very glad to be here. My latest book is actually entirely a defense of Swami Vivekananda. The challenge for me is that I'm giving a response to a certain issue that people have raised, that critics have raised. But unfortunately for me, most Vivekananda followers and scholars don't even know of the issue. So it's like asking a doctor telling a patient, I know how to solve that disease, and the patient says, I don't even know what disease you're talking about. So I have double challenge. First I have to explain what the problem is, why it's so serious, even though people aren't aware of it, but it is very serious, and those problems are even more serious. And then what is my response? Now, a lot of you who are tuned into the media and those who are reading books are aware that there is a lot of Indian left critique of Hinduism and of Swami Vivekananda, that this is oppressive, it's hegemonic, it's something artificial, it's something new, it's something made by the British. India is not a nation until the British made it. Hinduism also is a modern construction and full of problems and things like that. But very rarely do I come across somebody who's gone further to see where did this idea originate, who originated it, what was their argument. Because the Indian left and the media who parrot this really do not have the scholarship to have come up with it. They are not really well read in Sanskrit or philosophy or Vivekananda, but they just are regurgitating and cranking out something they've heard, that they've read somewhere else. Now, I have spent the last 14 months researching this issue, and then I wrote a response to this thesis that these people have. I was at a conference of the American Academy of Religion in November 2012. They were discussing my previous book, not this one, but a previous book, where I'm talking about the philosophical difference between Dharma civilization and Western civilization. Intellectually, what are the premises, categories, terms, metaphysics of one and how they differ from the other. A lot of issues like nature of time, the whole idea that many Sanskrit words have no equivalent. For instance, you cannot translate Shraddha. There's no word like that, no experience like that. Or a word like Shruti, because Shruti, Smriti, difference does not exist in the West. They have different idea of prophet comes and speaks and that's final and closed. So the whole idea that Shruti is rediscovered for each age and Smriti, man-made texts and interpretations go on indefinitely. That doesn't map onto, you cannot call it, if you say Vedas are prophetic, it's not, because they're not, the idea of a prophet is not present in our faith. A prophet is not somebody who has a higher state of consciousness. So Shri RamaKrishna cannot be called a prophet because he didn't say, I'm God speaking to me, told me this to tell you. Prophet is a messenger. It is not a person with a high state of consciousness. And so the Abrahamic religion will in fact tell you that a prophet doesn't have to have any qualifications. They will tell you that a prophet will be whoever God has chosen to please convey my message. He's simply a messenger, that's it. So the whole idea of higher state of consciousness is not required in those faiths. Whereas in our tradition, because the nature of the self is Satchitanand, higher state of consciousness is everything that we are trying to deal with. So our spiritual exemplars are not the same kind as the Prophet. So you can go on and I did that whole book on what are the distinctive characteristics of our civilization. Not that one is better than the other, but what is different. It's like, an apple is not the same as a banana. Not that one is better than the other, but they are not the same. So there was this panel discussion dedicated to my book with top Western scholars, one Indian, some Westerners, to each giving their commentary on my book. And the surprising thing is, they were very troubled by the feeling, by the fact that it reminded them of Vivekananda's ideas of Hinduism. And they accused me of basically using Vivekananda's philosophy to position dharma and then use that to discuss whatever I was discussing. I had never seen it that way, but they in fact got me interested in this issue. So I said, what is there about Vivekananda that troubles you so much? And therefore, by linking my book to Vivekananda, which I consider to be an honor, by linking my book to Vivekananda, you are raising these issues. And in the discussion, what came out is, all of them felt that there was really no such thing as Hinduism until Vivekananda fabricated it. One of them written a book called Was Hinduism Manufactured? Their thesis, which they call Neo-Hinduism thesis, goes as follows. Until Vivekananda, Indians had inferiority complex with respect to the British, because British had science, British were very charitable, Indians didn't have charity, all kind of inferiority complexes. So Vivekananda wanted to create national unity and a positive identity by copying good ideas from the British and from Christianity, putting them into Indian terms and making it sound like it is our religion. So the theory goes that Karma Yoga did not exist before. The Christians have charity to help each other, and he wanted to introduce this into India, so he called it Karma Yoga. The word Karma Yoga in the Gita has a different meaning. It is about individual moksha, not helping other people. So the Gita's idea of moksha is, of Karma Yoga is what I do for my own moksha. Christian idea is I help other people. So the claim goes that Swami Vivekananda just took this Christian idea and called it Karma Yoga, but it's not authentic. Now, just to take this one example, Swami Vivekananda used the term Tattvamasi as the basis for ethics. You are that. Since you and I are the same, and we are both forms of divine, so I love you, I have compassion for you. That's the philosophy. Now, this is a very old philosophy, but the people on the other side of the argument, their view is that Swami Vivekananda copied Tattvamasi from Paul Deussen, who was a well-known German Sanskrit scholar, one of the top students of Schopenhauer, who was also a well-known philosopher, Indian philosophy expert. Schopenhauer did not know Sanskrit. He studied philosophy, Indian philosophy through secondary translations, and his student Paul Deussen became a Sanskrit scholar and went deeper. And indeed, Paul Deussen did use the term Tattvamasi ethics. And he gave a lecture in Bombay, and Swami Vivekananda, according to the people on the other side of this debate, Swami Vivekananda was listening to this lecture in Bombay, and therefore he got the idea of Tattvamasi from Deussen. And because Deussen is a Christian, therefore he got a Christian idea, brought it into India and called it Hinduism. Now, I looked at Deussen's works on Tattvamasi. Actually, Deussen is criticizing Christianity, saying that Christian love for your neighbor, help your neighbor, there is no philosophical, metaphysical basis for it within Christian thought. Why should I love my neighbor? The fact that I'm told to love my neighbor is a command. I'm obeying the command of God. But what's the philosophical reason? And because he is just created by God, I'm created by God, why do I have to love him? God loves him enough. God can do these things for him. And he says that only by introducing the notion of Tattvamasi, that we are divine, only then you can have this idea of true love for other people. And this notion of Tattvamasi is missing in the Bible, missing in Christianity. So Doyson is actually criticizing Christianity's deficiency and proposing that they should fill this deficiency by borrowing this idea from the Vedas, Tattvamasi. However, when Vivekananda uses, it's okay that they want to borrow this idea. I have no problem with that. They want to borrow this Vedic idea into Christianity. But when Vivekananda uses this as his philosophy of Karma Yoga, helping other people, he's accused of taking Christian idea. Which means that they borrowed something from us, and then when we use it, we're accused of taking something of theirs. So it's a very strange kind of situation. So in this manner, I've gone through a lot of the ideas which the people have developed into a thesis called Neo-Hinduism, that there is no such really religion as Hinduism. It's a political construction. It's not even a faith. It never existed before the British. And all these ideas are fabricated. So the idea of Karma Yoga, I gave you example. Then, probably the central argument they have is that Advait Vedanta of Adi Shankara is not compatible with yoga. And for Swamiji it's very important. For Swamiji it's very important that there are different paths to moksha. And so the argument they're giving is that Advait Vedanta idea of yoga, idea of moksha is such that you cannot achieve moksha through yoga. This is the argument they're giving. And they're quoting Shankara and trying to show that Vivekananda is ignorant of Advait philosophy. His interpretation of Advait is wrong. And they're quoting Shankara to make that point. Now there is a lot of merit in what those people are saying. I will explain to you what it is. It's not a trivial objection. It's a very serious argument. And we have to give it the respect it deserves and then give a response. The argument they have is that Advait Vedanta says that the whole cosmos is causation, cause, effect, karma, phal. Every karma has a phal, and everything that exists is the effect of some cause. So microphone has some cause that created the microphone. Every action I do creates some effect. So the whole cosmos is a web of cause-effect, causation, and all knowledge that we have of this is, causation, knowledge of causation. The only thing outside causation is Brahman, and Brahman is not the effect of anything. You cannot cause Brahman to happen. So you cannot do something whose effect will be Brahman. This is all true. And moksha, as the state of existence as Brahman, Aham Brahmasmi, moksha cannot be the effect of a cause. I cannot do something, I cannot do a karma and get moksha. Because every karma will produce a phal which is within causation. So since everything I can do has an effect within causation, I can do good things and get good effects. I can do bad things and get bad effects. But there's nothing I can do whose effect will be moksha, because moksha is the state beyond causation, and therefore it cannot be caused. This is a good argument. It's not a foolish argument. It's not, this is an argument that Adi Shankara gives in his critiques, in his analysis. Now, therefore, they say that since yoga is something you do, the person is doing yoga, he's doing sadhana, he's doing tapas, he's doing, the dhyan, he's doing samadhi, he's doing something to get there. Therefore, whatever effect is produced is not moksha. So samadhi is not moksha. That is the thesis, that moksha cannot be caused by something you do, because whatever you do will produce an effect within the same web of causation. So the system of Adi Shankara was Shravanam, Mananan and Nididhyasana. The first is that you hear from a qualified teacher, you understand, Shruti, then you, Mananan is you intellectualize, you debate, you argue, you reason, you rationalize, you try to understand it logically, analytically, and then the third one, Nididhyasana, is the practice. Then you get to moksha. Now, Shankara didn't write too much on the third one. He wrote some texts, but not too much. Much of his writings are debates with opponents. So he's debating with Sankhya and he's debating with Buddhists. These are the two opponents he's debating with. So, you cannot take all the arguments of Shankara and assume that they apply in our situation, because his arguments were for a particular kind of opponent that he was debating. After Shankara, many of the Shankaracharyas of Sringeri and other mattas set up by him have expanded the interpretation of Advaita Vedanta to include yoga, because they are saying that while at the level of ego, the yogi is doing something. So Rajiv is doing something. I want to live sattvic and have some good effects. Okay, I'm doing. The sense of doer is there. But the argument that they've made that at a certain stage, letting go, surrender, letting go, dissolving the ego, all of you are familiar with this idea, leads to a state where there is a non-doer action. So moksha comes about with the non-doer action, and therefore since there is no doer doing the action, there is no phalla, because phalla is only when there is somebody who's doing it. Phalla is not because there is an action. If there is a doerless action, there is no phalla from that. So this argument which the other people have given that yoga and Vedanta are incompatible by citing Shankara is out of context. It is in the context of Shankara's writings while debating Buddhists, and it is superseded by subsequent writings of his own lineage. And so Vivekananda taps into that. But these critics say that Vivekananda got these ideas from British people. He plagiarized a lot of British ideas and Christian ideas and came up with these new things. And hence they feel that the unity, a unified thing called Hinduism is not viable, because it's full of contradictions, like Vedanta and yoga cannot be, like Karma yoga has nothing to do with helping others. So they've come up with every little part of Vivekananda's philosophy, bhakti, they've done the same. They've critiqued the main ideas of Swami Vivekananda and tried to show that there is contradiction, that he just put it quickly together to impress ignorant people. But if you look at it in a deep way, it violates all the shastras of Hinduism, or of our classical thought. And therefore, Hinduism as a construct by Vivekananda is not a valid construct. It's a hodgepodge manufactured for political motives, nothing else. And therefore, the sooner you get rid of it, the faster you can liberate Indian people, because it is the cause of all kinds of turmoil, distress, fights, oppression of minorities and whatnot. So there's a political spin. Now, I wanted to understand what is this parampara, who came up with all this, because I want to understand it. So I've spent the last 14 months, must have read maybe 50, 75 major treatises, PhD dissertations, heavy philosophical books from this parampara. The first person who coins the term Neo-Hinduism is a man called Paul Hacker in Germany. He, in the 1950s, until then the word Neo-Hinduism had not existed. There was a word Neo-Vedanta, which even Swami Vivekananda used. That's a different word. We're not referring to that. That's just Vedanta, its own interpretations, new interpretations. But Neo-Hinduism as a word is suddenly coined in the 1950s by Paul Hacker. And Paul Hacker is a well-known, very accomplished Sanskrit philosopher, Sanskrit scholar, philologist and so on. And he comes up with this idea that Hinduism is an artificial construction and not a valid construction, and the culprit who did it is Vivekananda. And he writes 10 articles, long, big articles and papers, they're widely published, and trying to each of those papers picks up some aspect of Swamiji's works and tries to take it apart as not authentic. And he assigns a motive of nationalism and politics, and Swamiji had an inferiority complex that Indians are weaker than the British, so he wanted to take all those ideas and put it into Indian terms. So that's his thesis. And then Halfas, who is in the University of Pennsylvania in the US, he invites Hacker on lecture tours, gives him a visiting professorship to promote him. So he gets promoted in the US among Indologists in the 50s. And then Agyahanand Bharati, some of you might know, he was a Viennese who became a sannyasi in India, took sannyas. He actually had some dealings with RamaKrishna mission also for a while. Swami Harshanand Maharaj was telling me that he had dealings with RamaKrishna mission, then for whatever reason he had a fight or something, he left. So he had a period of being a sannyasi, wearing orange robes, having a Hindu name, and he wrote a book called The Ochre Robe. Ochre is the color, describing his life as a sannyasi. And he was into Tantra, he was into many things. And then he went back to Europe, rejected and discarded Hinduism, and he joined this Neo-Hinduism parampara. He started propagating these ideas. He coined the term pizza effect, and he said Hinduism is a pizza effect. Pizza, it was a poor man's food in Italy. The rich elite did not eat pizza, it was for peasants, until Pizza Hut turned it into international cuisine. So once Pizza Hut takes the pizza into the whole world, they also make it more fancy with more toppings. And then the Italians are very proud of their pizza, and all the Italians start eating pizza because they're very proud. So Pizza Hut has made the Italians proud of pizza, and the Italians have borrowed this new kind of pizza, neo-pizza, it's not the real pizza. So similarly he says, British, in order to rule India, had come up with simplified, standardized ideas of religions, and they compiled this Hinduism just for the sake of governing them, governing the Indians. And they also wanted to respect the Indians. They gave it a romantic spin. It was really not true. Those were not really the true things, but they kind of made it very clean and philosophical and put Vedanta philosophy on the top and so on. And so, just like what Pizza Hut did for the simple pizza, the British did for dharma, our dharmas. And just like the Italians became very proud of this Pizza Hut variety and said this is ours, same way a very inferiority complex person, Vivekananda, took this British romanticized Hinduism and said this is ours, and then he embellished it further. He added all this Raj Yoga, calling it science, and added this Karma Yoga, and so he basically seized a very idealized, cleaned up, kind of simplified idea of Hinduism from the British and embellished it further and brought it back. So it's called a pizza effect. So that was Agyahanand Bharati's contribution. And then a woman in England known as Ursula King, who's an Anglican church minister, but for all her life she's been studying Hinduism and knows the Sanskrit classics and texts and writes a lot about it. She took this idea further, and she's the one who said that this Neo-Hinduism is politically dangerous because it's been taken over by political people now after Vivekananda, and so the way to get rid of this political Hinduism today is to expose Vivekananda having committed kind of a fraud, that he just made this up. And then there is a huge, big event in this parampara, because an Indian claiming to be Hindu, and a very prominent Indian today, very big ambassador of Hinduism all over the world, he becomes Ursula King's PhD student, goes to England, gets his PhD, and his name is Anand Bachchan. He is originally from the Caribbean, and this was in 1980s, early 80s. He got his PhD in England, and the PhD was on proving that Vivekananda's Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Raj Yoga, Bhakti Yoga cannot lead to moksha, according to Shankara, and therefore the whole life work of Vivekananda is just a sham. This is his PhD thesis, and since then he's produced many works similarly. Very philosophical. He will never say it in an insulting way. He'll say it in a very polite way. He'll say that we respect Vivekananda as a great man, but the ideas are not good, that sort of thing. So he wrote this, and within months, an echo started in India, which is the next chapter of this story. The first person in India to take up this topic was Ramila Thapar, at that time a much younger person. In the early 80s, he wrote a very influential article called Syndicated Moksha, which says that Hinduism is a syndicate. There's a syndicate of political people who fabricated this, and this is called Hinduism. And she quotes these Western people. She has not done the scholarship like these. Paul Hacker, at least he's done scholarship. Ursula King, at least she's done scholarship. Ram Bachchan, he's a solid scholar. He's really well informed about the text and trying to find little things to make his point. But Ramla Thapar doesn't know Sanskrit, doesn't know Indian philosophy, basically just quoting these people. And she unleashes a whole avalanche of Indian thinkers, writers, leftists, giving this spin on Hinduism. So today you see when Vivekananda's 150th anniversary was celebrated, Jyotirmay Sharma writes a book on Hindutva and Hinduism, and Vivekananda, the whole thing is a political sham, political construction, brilliant political construction, but no spiritual validity. That's his point of view. Pankaj Mishra writes the same way in UK and various parts of the world. New York Times, he's a bestseller. Then there's a lot of such writers who go around saying that Hinduism is just a recent construction. What they're implying but not saying is that Vivekananda did it. And a corollary to this recently invented Hinduism thesis is that India is a recent construction by the British because there's nothing unifying, no unifying idea of India. So this is what I set out to discover, and this is what preoccupied me full time from morning till night, 7 days a week, ever since I discovered all this, to understand it more deeply and come up with my own ideas, arguments. And the book Indra's Net, subtitled is Defending Hinduism's Philosophical Unity. This book is a response to the people who have come up with this Neo-Hinduism thesis. So I've gone to much earlier texts and shown that the unity that Vivekananda discussed and taught had existed long before the British colonialists. I've quoted many earlier authors who combined these things, who combined the bhakti and the karma and Raj Yoga and Vedanta. These ideas have existed. Swami Vivekananda put it in a modern context, in a modern vernacular, for a modern situation, and in our tradition you update knowledge. That is why smritis are different than shruti. We keep updating the way we're explaining something, but the knowledge is already there. So I have given a whole response. The book has two parts. Purva Paksh, which is taking each of those primary thinkers of that Neo-Hinduism thesis. I have separate chapters on them, explaining what they're saying. And then Uttar Paksh is part 2, which is my response. So that is